past. And I know that Martina has a conflict and Richard also has a conflict today and most likely in 2 weeks too and cannot attend. So it's for past and we can start. Welcome everyone to this interim meeting of the co-working group. I'm Marco. My co-chairs are Karsten Bormann and Jimenez. And this is an official IETF meeting, so the note well applies as usual. It's not also about IPRs, patents, and so on. It's also and especially about our code of conduct, so please be nice with one another. And as to IPR, if you participate in technical discussion, you have to disclose what you know about the topics on the discussion in question, or you can refrain from participating in the discussion. So the agenda for today is about two topics. One is the DNS over co-op document, And some points remain to address before we can proceed to a working group plus call hopefully soon, mostly related to comments received from Thomas Fossati on the mailing list, for which Christian has built up some information to discuss, and open a related issue on the core CLAR document. And then the second item is the core CLAR document, and Carsten drives the discussion on the status and the number of issues closed and addressed as pending content, at least in the document. Any more topics or any bashing in general? No, then it's up to Christian. And you don't have slides, Christian, right?
I don't have slides for this. No. I'll just go through this orally, and you also get the references in the minutes in the pad. So we got a few comments. We got comments from Thomas, and the main, like the most controversial parts were about how do we basically a treatment of DTLS. And I think that our response for all of that is like, it's just the same as everywhere else, and it's really a general co-op thing. So what remained from that is that our last version of the document used to reference the latest DTLS 1.3, whereas co-op is kind of specified based on DTLS 1.2. So what we plan to do is to update the reference from 9147, which is DTLS 1.3, to mentioning both and not going into detail, because that's really up to the underlying co-op. But that way, we don't give the impression anymore that we are requiring DTLS 1.3, which comes with a few caveats that yet need to be addressed. But from that document's point of view, I hope that this is satisfactory to all involved. Now, as for the can of worms that is still under there, there are two aspects to that. One is the more general case of what is all in DTLS 1.3 that we might want to revisit 7252 statements on, which corrections and clarifications would be a great venue to discuss it, even if it turns out that in the end maybe someone needs an update to that earlier than a full corrections and clarifications publication. But that's the one thing, so I'll shuffle this around. And the more concrete thing is that both with DTLS 1.2, especially in points that Thomas pointed out, but also in DTLS 1.3 more frequently, and actually also in OSCORE, we can have situations where security context is established, but the return routability check has not been done, which DTLS contains a mechanism for, but also states that this mechanism may not be needed if there's an application layer mechanism that does the same better. And I think CoAP does. So there is a proposed text in issue 39 on correction and clarifications on how to deal with the two related cases of A, we have a security context, but we can't be sure it's not a replay. And B, our security context is good, but the return routability check is not valid for that address. So we need to do all the amplification mitigation. And the same tools apply to both of them, but technically there are separate concerns. So this text in issue 39 goes into that in 5 paragraphs, and I hope clears it up to the point where it can also be used for OSCORE just as well. Carsten?
So one of the things I'm not entirely sure I fully understand yet, I only have skimmed the return routability check. We do have echo in CoAP,
which is precisely the application layer mechanism that comes to bear here.
Yeah, so are we saying you should not use RRC with CoAP, or?
Let me look up what precisely we said. Well, the text says, but it boils down to there is a co-op mechanism. If you use that as intended, you don't need to use RRC.
Yeah, but that still puts the onus on an implementer to implement both, because we haven't said which of the ones you should be using.
That's a good point, and it might be prudent to say something like, you need to use you will probably what do we say? I mean, there might be situations in which both peers have RRC implemented in their stacks, and there will be cases where both peers have Echo in their stacks already. So it's probably up to us to make a preference and say that one of the two is what is required. And well, if you ask me, I might be biased, but I'll probably be going for Echo because it works on all co-op security mechanisms. So can I just say that?
Yes. So I think we also have to make sure that there aren't use cases covered by RRC that are not covered by Echo. So I haven't looked very closely at the resumption type exchanges that would use RRC.
Neither have I. I can have another look before I do the final edit.
Sounds good.
But gut feelings. So like we are already covering a bit more than what RRC is for, because we are also doing the freshness part. So gut feeling is it should just work. But I'll go through the document, and if it specifies what is there, I'll run those parts that it needs to satisfy after Echo.
Christian, where do you plan to give this preference or recommendation? In which document?
I would give that I would add that to the text in corrections and clarifications 39.
Right. I think it better fits there. And thinking of what should be in DOC, perhaps it's text for the security consideration that builds on the comments from Thomas on the list, and well, it can give references to the appropriate sections of CoreClar where this is discussed better.
Yep, that sounds reasonable.
Yeah.
So once we have this text in CoreClar, of course, we need to notify the working group that does this RRC thing that we are trying to design around that.
They explicitly say that basically they give an example. They even give Echo as an example of a case where things that you might use instead.
So we should notify that we are working around them. We should notify them how we are working around them, so they can comment on whether we're doing this right.
And give a more precise reference.
So do you want to do a PR, or should I develop a PR out of the issue?
I'm happy to do a PR if I get a bit of guidance where this where this would best go. So right now I was starting to write because I didn't know where to put in the document, and that's why the text was in there.
A starting point can be the current section 251, that it's somehow on topic. Maybe it should become a bit broader, but it's DTLS with connection ID.
Yeah, so I have some slides about that in a second. Was it 251?
Yeah, 251 is specific on details with connection ID, but it's part of the broader thing, 25
yeah.
matchboxing.
But maybe then it makes sense to just advance into the correction and clarification section and revisit then, or
so we don't really have to put this in the right place right away, but we certainly can start in 251.
And of course, DOC is fine with just an informative reference to Corclar.
Yes, please.
Oh, yes, and even better if Corclar is adopted before we ship DOC.
Like I prefer to point into a published draft version, but if need be, I reference into the GitHub issue, because kind of DOC takes some processing anyway, and by the time gets updated in due course.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think the important observation here is we don't want to restate things. We essentially want to say, as everywhere else in CoAP, we are not forking CoAP to do DOC. I think that's the important part of it.
Yeah, the point from Thomas about mentioning these things at all in DOC is because DOC is a good example of class of applications with certain preferences, expectations, and whatnot. So
Yep.
you shouldn't just leave it be for somewhere else. But yeah, security considerations with good pointers look good.
I think it's also some of the discussion really sparked off because we were referencing the DTLS 1.3 specification, just out of following the practice of when a document gets updated, you reference the latest version of it without thinking much of it.
Okay, so for DOC, the direction should be clear enough, and the reference to the DTLS version should be done already in the editor's copy, if I remember correctly, and it's more about adding more text aligned to this discussion and the security considerations.
Yeah, I'll have to look up what precisely is merged yet already, but it's immaterial for the discussion here, I think.
There's also an issue still open on the GitHub of DOC, but based on the conversation there, it looked like the author team is converging. I think that they're waiting for a final green light from you, Christian.
I'll have to check. I'll have to check that, but it seems so, yeah.
Great. And we also have DTLS LPN out and stable, by the way. Not that I can imagine any big work to be done there, and well, the two documents can move on in parallel, basically. Okay, anything more on DOC?
Not from me.
Heard, read none. Okay, then we move to Corclar, and Karsten does have slides. Oh, you're still in the queue, Karsten, by the way. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry, I always forget to take me out of there, but now I cannot manipulate because I'm starting a slideshow. Okay, now I can take myself out of the queue. Yeah, so of course, since we talked about Corclar in the last 10 minutes, this is essentially a continuation, but just as a reminder where we are, we plan to work on Corclar issues at essentially every interim, and we're going to do this today, but focusing on finishing stuff that already were half cooked at Vancouver IETF. So I think we already agreed in Vancouver that issue 8 is completely addressed. So I'm going to talk about issues 7, 9, and 10. And 9 is probably the most interesting one. So let's do 7 and 10 first. And I submitted Calcula 05 yesterday, just so we have a new baseline where things we mostly have agreed to do are in there. But that doesn't keep us from needing reviews. So one of the purposes of bringing up my slides will be to solicit reviews so we can essentially consider things completed. So let's start with the less interesting part, the trailing slash discussion. I think we already had finished the technical discussion in Vancouver, but there was a comment that the examples were not widely spread enough, and people are looking for examples instead of trying to understand text. And I can only sympathize with that. So we added some examples in PR 37 that are now in -05. And those people who asked for more examples, please look at the section. The section is, I cannot click on the slides being presented. So the green thing saying I-D that has the link to the section that needs to be reviewed. 2.3.
I checked it yesterday. Looks good, and I did request more examples. Yeah, looks good. Thank you.
Can I delete the incomplete?
From where? From the draft itself?
From the draft itself. It currently says the formal edition is incomplete. I think it's no longer incomplete.
Yeah, from my point of view, it's complete now. Christian also had some input on that, I think.
Yeah, but I do see that there are examples of like a single, 2, and 3 slashes already in there, so looks complete to me.
Good. So the action item for me is to take away the incomplete and maybe get some more reviews. Okay, that was easy. Then the request URI not defined thing. We do have a formal edition, which is useful to have, and that is section 2.1 actually. But there is a big pending in that. Which is we now have a term, a defined term for request URI, but we also have a base URI. And the base URI is interesting because we have this change of address within a request response pair when we do multicast. And I think we need to be a little bit more verbose on how this actually influences the base URI. So that part is still pending. The request URI is done. The base URI is not yet fully addressed. And it's interesting to see that HTTP has had its own evolution in this space. So we should probably look what they were trying to do there, and they simplified that a lot. So there may be a reason for trying to simplify this.
Yeah. Kind of thinking through this as you're talking about it, because I think I'd like to add some text. I'd like to add that text there is that even the location option would influence what the base URI is, even though that is not the request URI, because the response is supposed to be a representation of that. So yeah, do you have any pointers on what the changes were, or is it just really reading the diff between 9110 and 7230?
Well, it's pretty extensive because they aren't even using the term they used in 7230 anymore. So they reverted to earlier terms. But I can take out the section. So action point on me clarifying what the last item on the slide means. Good. The next thing is the match boxing, the epoch stuff. And there is a clarification and an opportunity. So the clarification, I think, is pretty much done. This just explains, yes, we mean the nonsense that we wrote in 7252. And the opportunity is to fix that. We can make sure that new documents handle the subject. And I think the new text we now have for OSCOR, Kudos, Group OSCOR, explains that. So I think we are, apart from not having enough reviews, we are pretty much done. So we didn't manage to catch any review for PR 36 since Vancouver. That's a little bit too little. It's now in the internet draft, so maybe somebody wants to review it there. But then we also have existing documents, and in particular the CID, connection ID thing, which of course highly interacts with what we discussed about doing DTLS 1.2 and 1.3 for DOC. So we have to think about how to do that. And maybe we also should say a little bit more about what implementations are out there and how they handle the problem. So somebody mentioned the CF matcher in, I think it was California. We need to describe what is going on there and either bless it with our seal of approval or explain how that breaks things. So the interesting question is, can we write something that explains how connection ID somehow mitigates the effect that the original epoch text has on continuing observations across changing your security context? And I think that there are three ways of doing this. We could write text in Corcla. This is, of course, going to be related to the text that Christian is now writing for the DOC thing. And the main problem is that we are not going to have this available as a normative reference. And since this is likely to really explain new protocol behavior, that's maybe not the best way to do this. The second possibility would be to write a separate document about just this, where just this is essentially all the DTLS 1.2 extensions / DTLS 1.3 considerations. So how does using DTLS 1.3 change what the COAP document says about epoch? I think that would be the best way of doing this. We just have this little problem that we need to find authors who are interested in writing this up. Or we could actually put this into another existing document, like the TLS 1.3 IoT profile document that is in UTA. It's currently expired. That's why I didn't find it. I would be interested why that is expired. That is would be a good thing, because that document already has a focus on 1.2 and 1.3, but then it may be adding too much COAP specific stuff in there, which the authors and or the working group may not like. So we would have to find out what to do there. We could even throw this into the ALPN document just to open up the number of potential ways forward.
As an author of ALPN, I'd say rather not, because
Okay.
I'm not too interested in either TLS or DTLS. ALPN is in there because I'm interested in SVCP, so there won't be much interest on that side.
Okay, so forget that suggestion. I just wanted to point out there's a number of weird ways of handling this. Anyway, I think what we should do is we should simply work on this in Calcula at this point in time. So we should do the editing, get text we can agree on for now. But we also should think about whether 2 or 3 is actually maybe something we want to do. We probably want to talk about the TLS 1.3 IoT profile authors, whether they are interested in picking this up at the point in time when it's sufficiently well written up in Calcula, because that indicates to the authors that they don't have to write that much new text. But I'm not sure how this is treated in UTA, and I also don't know why this idea is expired. So we would have to find that out.
At any rate, on the topic of need to find interested authors, 2 of the 3 authors of IoT profile would have been who might have suggested for contacting. So it's not a bad match.
Okay. Okay, so my conclusion from the discussion here is that we will work on this in Calcula and do a couple of pull requests and so on, and up to a point where we think this is sufficiently stable, and maybe we can warn the IoT profile people that we are doing this, and try to find out whether they want to pick it up. And otherwise, we can do a new document, and just to avoid doing core stuff in UTA. Yeah, but right now we haven't built us an obstacle that we will stumble over because we can do this in Calcula.
Yeah, if core clar is really about correction and clarifications, the kind of text started now in section 521, no, 251 on this topic is okay, but the text is already mentioning, well, to fully advance this, we need to define more rules, basically, to do the matchboxing in a more advanced way. And yeah, rules like that are beyond corrections and clarifications, I think. So either the scope of core clar becomes way broader, or yeah, it's a topic for another document.
Which would be a 7252 bis?
No. No, I don't think that TLS 1.3 should be the reason to do a bis. I think we should just have a point document that explains how to do CoAP with TLS 1.2 connection identifiers and or TLS 1.3.
As far as I could understand from the UTA document, when it gets specific to co-op is only about the, well, keeping the support for algorithms based on CCM8. And another little point, but nothing so advanced like this, basically.
Okay.
It's sufficient to look for co-op, simply. I should reopen the document. Or an old chat. Maybe that's quicker. Yeah, of course, and the impossibility to use zero RTT during a handshake that, for example, you can have otherwise. So they seem to quickly touch about those 2 points when they talk specifically of co-op. But other than that, the focus is more on DTLS in itself. So maybe they are not too interested in that document or in another UTA document to get deep into new rules for matchboxing of co-op.
So we should expect that we will go into number 2.
It's more likely, but maybe it's worth checking with UTA, starting with Thomas, just to be sure. But
Yeah.
I would guess that.
Looking at basically what you hinted at with the mentions of co-op in the UTA document, they currently say that basically you can't use 0RTT because there is no profile that says when it's allowed, even though co-op has really straightforward rules on which operations are safe and idempotent. Is that something that would suffice to have the text in core on? Or would that also need the version, the option number 2 document? Because right now that text that basically opens up for 0RTT is in pull request 38. Sorry, in issue 38.
Oh. It's probably worth pointing to the part of the UTA document covering that. Just to build more context. But I think
can core open this up, or does that also need to go into a version 2 into a bullet item 2 document?
Yeah, if it's a functional update, it seems fitting better in another document. If we imagine core the way it looks like today.
So that would mean that core states that it is disallowed in DTLS, but if anything wanted to do it, the same rules as we have for OSCORE would apply.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the UTA document touches 0RTT just to say something and avoid confusion, since it's something that you can do in general in DTLS 1.3, but, well, not with core. Which makes sense as a clarification.
Yeah, but the document number 2 could still define the specific situations where you can do it.
Mm-hmm.
So the cross references would then be core class says that 2 opens it up, and whether 2 becomes a thing or not, or how that becomes a thing, kind of the reference only needs to be final at publication time anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I think I'm fine at this point.
So there's a bit of juggling needed with issues and PRs, basically.
Yes.
Also importing from DOC-related contribution.
Yeah, so the issue 38 really is not much about DOC at all. It's just clarifying those
right.
Considerations, and so we don't get DOC except maybe as an example for an application in issue 38.
So if we want DOC to have an informative reference to CoreClar in its security considerations, we first need a new version of CoreClar that has the needed content or a stub of it.
Yeah, not really. I can insert a reference that goes into the GitHub issue, and when for publication these references are updated, hopefully that GitHub issue is closed, and I'll replace the reference with a CoreClar reference. But it's
okay.
I don't see an issue with that.
No.
I mean, during the Shepherd write-up, the reference normativity needs to be fixed. But even that is like, if it's an informative reference, shouldn't matter too much.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's all I have.
But thanks a lot. That was a lot of work. I know there is more, but
Yeah, there are 30 more issues to work on. So it's not a lot like we will be done by Christmas.
okay. But once we have ingested and digested the main points covered today and are into the draft, we can consider adoption, I think.
Yeah, can we do an adoption call on Dash 05?
We can. Do you expectorally want to have another pass?
I don't think so. Right now, it's a stable situation. I mean, we still have 30 issues.
Yeah, of course. The work is not done.
It's not like we are somehow inconsistent with ourselves here. So I think we could do the adoption call here.
Yeah, the scope is stable, especially if we don't want to involve things that are better for the approach to there. And I know Christian was screaming for adoption a few meetings ago. Hat off, I believe this should happen, and it's really useful for what it's worth.
Okay.
Any opposition, by the way? Maybe we are missing the explicit opinion from Loran only here today, but
brief point just on the topic of like scope being stable. Can there might be cases where we have text that like slips into core clar in the awareness that it won't stay there, but will, for example, move into a document like the variant 2 document. Is that fine as long as it's like clearly documented? For example, the issue 38 text, we won't have a variant 2 document like tomorrow. I'd still like to do that text. If the text says that is something to move out, but right now there is no place to move it, can it still be in there with the document to be adopted?
Yeah, I think so. If it's just a convenient placeholder, yes.
It wouldn't survive a working group last call.
It doesn't need to.
It can be in the document while we are developing an issue.
If it's just provisional there, it's convenient to have it there to have all the other rest of the document around to give context, of course, rather than somewhere else altogether, like on an issue or something. But yeah, if it's just there temporarily and will be moved out, sure, that would work. Okay, but then we start an adoption call on Dash 05.
Good.
2 weeks should be enough. So concluding on Wednesday in 2 weeks.
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, will do.
Great.
Okay. So we covered both main topics. We are at the AOB. Anything else you wanted to mention or discuss about core? Hearing none, then thank you all. Talk to you in 2 weeks. Stay safe.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good, Chris.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye-bye.